The rise of dictators. In 1924, Joseph Stalin took control of the Soviet Union and transformed it from a backward rural nation into a great industrial power. He abolished all privately owned farms and replaced them with government-owned farms. He also placed all economic activity under state management. By 1937, the Soviet Union had become the world's second largest industrial power, but Stalin was ruthless to those who threatened him. Historians estimate that he was responsible for the deaths of 8 to 13 million people, and millions more died in famines caused by the restructuring of Soviet society. By 1939, Stalin had firmly established a totalitarian government that maintained complete control over its citizens. Individuals had no rights, and the government suppressed all opposition. Meanwhile, in Italy, Benito Mussolini was establishing a totalitarian regime of his own. In Italy, unemployment and inflation were leading to strikes, some of them communist-led. The middle and upper classes demanded that the government take a stronger leadership over the situation, and in stepped Mussolini. He played on the nation's fears of economic collapse and communism to rise to power. He established the Fascist Party, stressing nationalism and placing the interests of the state above those of individuals. To strengthen the nation, fascists argued, power must rest with a single strong leader and a small group of devoted party members. Mussolini called himself Il Duce, or the leader, and made Italy a totalitarian state. In Germany, Adolf Hitler followed a path similar to Mussolini's. At the end of World War I, Hitler had been a jobless soldier drifting around Germany. In 1919, he joined a struggling group called the National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazis, that had nothing to do with socialism despite its name. He was such a powerful public speaker that he quickly became the party's leader, known as Der Führer. Nazism was based on extreme nationalism and had 3 very clearly defined goals. Hitler dreamed of uniting all German-speaking people in a great German empire. He also wanted to enforce racial purification, believing that Aryans, non-Jews, were destined to rule the world as the master race, and inferior races, such as Jews, Slavs, and non-whites, were deemed fit only to serve the Aryans. Finally, he believed that for this German empire to thrive, it needed more space. One of the Nazis' goals was land expansion, Lebensraum, and they attempted to get it, even if that meant they had to use violence. The Nazis used the Great Depression to come to power. Germany greatly relied on American loans and investments, so the Great Depression hit them hard. By 1932, 6 million Germans were unemployed. Many out-of-work men joined Hitler's private army, the stormtroopers. The German people were desperate and turned to Hitler as their last hope. By mid-1932, the Nazis had become the strongest political party in Germany. In January of 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor, or Prime Minister, and once in power, Hitler quickly dismantled Germany's existing democratic government and established the Third Reich, or Third German Empire. We need to stop and establish a very important fact. All of the dictators we have talked about so far rose to power because of the desperation caused by the Great Depression, and none of these leaders were communist. In fact, their people appointed them out of a fear of communism. Now in Japan, things were a little different. Although there was an emperor, military commanders quickly rose up in political power under the leadership of Hideki Tojo. They shared in common with Hitler a belief in the need for more living space for a growing population. These nationalist military leaders gained control of the nation's government and began imperialist efforts, seizing control of the Chinese province of Manchuria. The League of Nations was powerless to stop them or any of these other dictators. They sat back and watched as Japan and Germany pulled out of the League of Nations and began violating the Treaty of Versailles. Meanwhile, Americans weren't afraid of these powers. They were more afraid that totalitarianism would spread to America, So they sought isolation even more. In other words, Americans were not so much afraid that totalitarian aggression would cause trouble as they were fearful that they might be drawn into it. Strong nationwide sentiment welled up for a constitutional amendment to forbid a declaration of war by Congress, except in case of invasion. Americans falsely assumed that the decision for peace or war lay in their own hands, not in those of the satanic forces already unleashed in the world.